Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Sunrise Daily. I'm Chamberlain.
Well, it is midweek. Beautiful Wednesday morning. I am Kayode Kikele.
And I'm Ayo Makine. Welcome to the program today.
Okay, so we'll just go ahead and take a look at, yes, the schools have resumed, but have a look at this report first.
After months of compulsory shutdown of schools, disrupted academic calendar, and the growing trend of online classrooms, it's back to school time for the students who are hoping to pick up from where they left off. At this private school in Lagos, the arrangement appears to be elaborate, with a medical team on standby and a thorough screening process in place. 2 meters measured and other public health safety guidelines visible, the school authorities say they're not ready to take chances.
We don't want to risk anybody coming from home. Even the staff are going to be camped in the school to prevent moving from home to school.
In a neighboring school, hygiene and safety precautions are also followed, with a thermometer gun coming handy. The story of this set of students are slightly different. They are residents in Lagos, schooling far away from home. Their parents have made a group travel plan, and what better time to embark on a long-distance journey than early morning. While some of these students are visibly excited about returning to school, there's also the reality of whether they might be too rusty to ace their forthcoming exams.
And you are ready?
Yes, very, very. By the grace of God, we are ready.
Okay, so when is the exam in the first place?
17.
We're also afraid that, a lot of them, for one thing or the other, because of the gap, they would have lost some things they were preparing to write in their exam before. But we pray that God will help them.
Hoping to have checked all the safety boxes, the parents seek divine intervention.
Put an end to this coronavirus disease in the name of Jesus.
As these students head out for a 4-hour journey to Osun State, their parents say the news of the clean bill of health and good academic performance are all they hope for. Dari Idowu, Channels Television News.
So there you go. That's some of the images you see about school resumption. I know how first days can be, but yes, well, many. Of course, I think cameras will get back there beyond the first day to ensure that that discipline will imbibe that and continue to carry all of those out. Well, we're hoping as well. Remember, the teachers, they threaten to, down tools if they don't provide those PPEs or those equipment. Was PPE among what they were requesting?
I think that's a challenge. We're trying to define protection because if they're not protected, so we're trying to define what protection really means, and I think that has been the challenge quite.
Well, who knows? But it's good to see that at least some of them are imbibing that. Remember, the huge concern has always been about public schools, how they will conduct themselves. For those who may not have that kind of organization, who have to hit the buses there, you could only, do we say hope now? Or expect that all of those measures will be put in place, because, look, it's not going to be that easy.
Absolutely.
Because you always will have a lot of people who would just feel, just little laps here and there. But then we always have to keep being on our guard.
And I think that's why it's important to always check these things. I mean, when the cameras are there, you would expect everybody to be at their best. Everybody behaves the way they ought to. But, once the cameras are not there, you wonder what will happen, which is why it's important for the government, and of course media would always keep tabs on these things to ensure that these measures, protocols are adhered to, because these are the future of Nigeria. They are our future, and we don't want to mess with them. I feel for them, really, because a lot of them might be rusty now, especially the ones that are going to be writing exams in how many days? 13, 12 days. I mean, you're resuming and you're writing major exams. I really feel for them. And I wonder what kind of questions would be set for them. Will the difficulty level be lowered a bit just to, make up for this period? I really don't know.
Well, in terms of the marking scheme?
And in terms of
the difficulty of the questions.
So instead of having theories all through, maybe objectives, and maybe not too hard, not the types that all the options will look the same.
Would that affect the standards?
Well, That's another big question.
Is it going to also affect how the problems of the future that they are training for will be solved?
But let's be honest, these young people have been affected. And it's something we can overlook and say they'll be fine. But imagine young people that are used to playing with their peers, they're used to going out. All of a sudden you tell them to stay at home for not just a day. I mean, telling them to stay at home for an hour is a big deal. Or just stay in a place is a big deal. Now imagine months. So I think we should pay attention to them. Really.
Well, I agree with you, but you know, there are a number of things in the value chain of the schools that we haven't even given some maybe adequate attention to. Of course, you know, we all know what the aviation sector has done to minimize, you know, contact with people. They've cut down on serving food on the aircrafts. That's for the aviation sector. How is that going to play out in the schools? You know, part of the value chain of the school is that they will have food vendors who will be selling, you know, stuff for the children, selling hobnobs, food, proper food, drinks, and all of that. How is that going to be managed?
He knows what
in
they
that
sell.
value chain?
Nice.
You know what I mean? I went to a public school, for God's sake, so I have an idea of how these things are going to play. And, well, maybe our own days may have been better, you know, but these days it's probably a lot worse because there are so many schools, so many more students, and
So many
all of that.
hobnobs.
Yes, I mean, it's the truth, come on. And then, so that's on the one hand, you know, how are we managing that? Is that part of are those considered in the 52-page guideline for the reopening of schools? How are the school management going to, you know, take that on board? That's on the one hand. And then, of course, we have referenced that idea of what the students, what the teachers have talked about, PPEs for them and all. That's a giving on paper. What does it look like in reality? Then take this matter to the schools that will never come under the cameras, in front of the cameras. I'm talking about schools, public and private schools, in the suburbs and the rural areas. They also have educational programs going on there. How are the state governments and the local governments managing to ensure the enforcement of all of these guidelines? We can't just leave it to chance and expect that these things are going to be done. The federal government has made that provision there. It is up to us lot to, as the NCDC has said over time, take responsibility. How are we helping people to be educated about these things and to take responsibility? Because we do not want, yes, we all know that the PTF, for instance, is concerned that reopening of schools, we should do it very, very cautiously. Even on the day that the schools are going to be resuming, the PTF COVID-19 says that. That puts a lot of question on so many other things. So,
well, yes, indeed. Don't forget the health sector too, because now the response people get is that when they get to public hospitals, the government hospitals, they're treated as COVID-19 patients. So many of them just want to avoid all of those. It's alarming for, you know, families of those who may have needs to be there. So, well, those are some of the concerns that you know, we have to just keep walking and moving forward.
Did you notice, if I could just quickly jump in, the discharge rate, the latest one, 31,000. Yesterday was 20,000, and people are wondering, did we discharge 11,000 in a day? Definitely there will be some explanation. There has been some sort of explanation, but a lot of people are wondering, 11,000. But that's what we have from the latest figures.
Hoping that they're not in a hurry to let everybody go and wind down those centers.
Well, there will be some explanation, definitely.
We'll hope it suffices. All right, we'll take a look at the dailies now. Let's go ahead and start with Nigerian Tribune. Buhari orders total overhaul of security strategies. That's what the Tribune reports this morning. Says Nigeria now hard drug producing country. Oh dear. Sultan can call for effective security of citizens. Governors meet today over degenerating security. Remember the day before, yesterday as a matter of fact, they had reported that, I think the governor said they were frustrated, things were out of hand.
Prison and alarmingly.
And so there are questions as to, all right, so having said that, what next? Because they've said that before. And so, well, all eyes will be on them to see what eventually happens. And then total overhaul of security strategies. I know you're thinking, okay, how is that? What are you expected to see as a result of this? Yeah, it is the big one. Hey, don't forget this part when they're now saying that Nigeria is now a hard drug producing country. There's been a lot of concerns as to whether we should be a transit country, but now
We're producing.
destination. Now you're producing. If you're producing, it means there's huge consumption. Okay, maybe not huge, but there is a consumption. There's a demand for you to produce, or are they producing
I
to
think
export?
it's huge, really, because judging from what the NSA said, it's saying that they've seen a link between drug use and crime. And if you've seen crime skyrocketing, or at least increasing, then you understand that
Well,
drug use is also maybe
I
increasing.
just wonder when they saw this, because this has been there for a long time. I
Did
mean,
they also connect security challenges with unemployment?
Maybe the next meeting, but I remember that security strategy also pointed out, I mean, last year's security strategy also pointed out to some of these issues, but in recent times, we've only had issues with unregistered SIM cards at the last meeting and now drug use.
Because if you're going to talk about drug use, you expect that certain agencies would
Are
have
doing
ramped
something.
up, or some capacity.
Yeah.
They would have addressed the capacity challenge that they've got to address this.
Yeah, I think that statement actually gives credence to that saying, an idle mind is the devil's workshop, which is why the issue of unemployment, because if people are gainfully employed, will they have time for all of that?
Well, there you go. That's a big one you find right there. Chinese loans, $400 million project abandoned after completion. $161 million paid on capital interest. $322.67 million outstanding. Full payment, okay, outstanding full payment due 2030. Yeah. And then this has been going on for a whole bit now. Finance Act stops NIPOs from stamp duty collection. Remember that the NIPOs had said, I think that's the head of NIPOs, that said that FRS was stealing their idea on stamp duty collection.
And their responsibilities as well.
Yeah, so they said NIPOS was having sleepless nights because of some of these things. The general public needs to come to our aid, they say, because they say that FRS is trying to strangulate, well, if I could use that word, because that's what it comes across as. But there you go, you might as well just check that one out there. Sovereign immunity clause, diplomatic immunity not same as commercial immunity, AGF tells National Assembly. I'll let you see that one, but look at the back page. UEFA abolishes red card for goal-bound foul. There you go.
No way.
Yeah, so they say you don't want double jeopardy. I mean, send them off, then you give a penalty. So it's too harsh.
Well, sometimes it might happen outside the box, for example.
Is this going to affect the hand of God goal?
Really?
You remember the Maradona goal?
Clearly, but I mean, this is...
I mean,
That tells you a lot. That speaks volumes.
It's okay. It's okay.
Well, it's allowed anyway,
Yeah.
so it's all part of it.
No red card for you.
Yeah, no red card for you. So we'll abolish the red card rule for that offense. That's the Tribune this morning.
Oh, let's take a look at Daily Trust for you. Quickly, you see the lead story. News tightens around service chiefs. That's how the Daily Trust chooses to caption that story. As Buhari moves to overhaul security apparatus, says Nigerians have lost confidence in system. But take a look at what this expert says. They should just go. Quite short statement, but it means a lot. And citizens want action, not speeches. That's coming from CSOs. And for them, it appears as though we're getting more speeches than actions. You can find more details on page 4 of Daily Trust this morning. And let me just walk you through the pictures you see on the front page. It shows final year students across schools during their resumption after the easing of COVID-19 lockdown in schools yesterday. In that big picture, you can see social distancing. I mean, students sitting far apart. And you see that, well, if this is what we'll do consistently over the coming days and weeks, then I'm confident, really, that we'll...
And everywhere.
And everywhere.
I'd love to see maybe some Twitter videos of what schools look like in rural areas.
Okay. So let's head to Twitter.
Yes, please. So you want to do us that favor.
So that's a picture you find on the front page, really. And take a look at this one right on top of that big caption. NIPOST FIRS feud over stamp duty deepens on Twitter, really, because That's where we see a lot of the action. And people are
Stamp
wondering.
duty is big deal now,
Yeah.
believe it or not.
People are wondering.
Especially because the federal government is expecting something in the region of 1 trillion naira from stamp
Oh
duties
dear.
alone.
So there's a target, yeah?
Yep.
And we need to hit that target.
So maybe that's why NIPOS is like,
Now we're expecting 40,000 megawatts of electricity.
Oh, yes. And security, too. A
Everyone
lot of
is expecting
expectations,
something,
really.
yeah.
So. But yeah, that's that one. And the concern for a lot of people is why we're having this on Twitter. What happened to all this memos written, and people shouldn't know much about it. But you take a look at that on page 19. And WAEC releases 2020 timetable for examination. Afenfere leader Fasomi laid to rest. It's on page 5. And see this one, sports page. Spain and Real Madrid legend Casillas retires. People wondering, will he ever
22-year
retire?
career.
Honestly.
Wow.
And people are looking the way of Juventus keeper. But you know what? Let's leave it there for
How many
daily
years
trust.
are our own profession? Okay. Story for another day.
over the past 6 months, do you know how much you have spent on data? The Guardian newspaper will tell you. You have spent 2 trillion naira for calls and data in the past 6 months.
Just one person. We.
You.
Okay.
You. You can define it in your own.
All right. Nigerians.
Nigerians paid 2 trillion naira for calls and data in 6 months. That's a lot of money. COVID-19 pushes up expenditure amid poor services. Each subscriber, that is you, has spent an average of 1,725 naira monthly. GSM operators see more growth, of course. MTN claims pandemic spike data usage. Well, that's some figures you find there on the front page of the Guardian newspaper between January and June, amounting to 1.97 trillion naira that has been made. How much tax is that going to produce? Why did my head have to go that way? Change your tactics now. Buhari orders security chiefs. Panel alleges diversion of 6.2 billion naira palliatives for Niger Delta by NDDC. So it's on page 1. Under the chart you see right there. More voices against Kaduna killings. Diaspora Nigerians beckon on United Nations. Certain others urge caution on northern-wide crime. That story is on the front page and continues on the second page of the Guardian newspaper this morning. That's the Guardian today.
Okay, take a look at Vanguard next. Those we named took our contracts. NDDC insists, reveals 250 contracts taken in one day in the name of NAS. New revelations of 6.2 billion naira palliatives fraud by NDDC's IMC. NDDC is cash cow for politicians. Wiki. Stranded scholars to be paid this week. Buhari invited to commission 24 billion naira Ogbeanembe Road in Bayelsa. Fresh posers by Senate over 330 million naira expenditure by IMC to hire boat. So you got all of that there today. Just go ahead and see that. Well, they're keeping tabs on COVID-19 as well. Yes, they have a version of Buhari to completely rejig security system. That's from the NSA. A Papa traffic crisis to linger till December. Ascribed to the presidential task team. And you can see the report inside. If you look at the back page, Napoli, that's Champions League. Napoli roll out Osimhen, Goam from squad. So perhaps early days here for them. NFF set up caretaker committee for Anambra State FA. At what you see there. I wonder why they're reflecting what for sack Pearson now. I mean, that happened a while ago. But it's still featuring here. That's Vanguard anyway.
Well, next up is Leadership newspaper and the big story. Change your tactics. PMB tells security chiefs. It's on page 4. Orders re-engineering of security apparatus. Illegal aliens in mining sector colluding with bandits and kidnappers. From the NSA. That's another angle to that one. And link rising insecurity to drug abuse. And the big picture shows service chiefs en route to that meeting. yesterday. And you see this one, President gives NDDC 1 week to pay fees of overseas students. That has been in the news. You see the students going on social media, sending messages saying we need help.
And
we're really
campaigning.
struggling. Yes,
Campaigning.
saying we need help. So it's good news, really.
There was a demonstration, I think it was yesterday or the day before yesterday, by these Nigerians.
Yet another demonstration, I mean, a series of demonstrations. So 1 week to pay those fees that's coming from the president to the NDDC. NAS probes alleged diversion of 6.2 billion naira Niger Delta Palliatives Fund. Still more revelations coming from the NDDC. An update on the Chinese loan, which we took earlier. Nigeria's sovereignty not at risk. It's coming from the federal government. Some explanation, really, in view of that misconception or the debate over what the sovereignty clause means. So that's an explanation.
People are asking questions. Let's see the details. As Chamberlain would often say, the devil is in the details. Let's take the devil out.
Okay.
Yep.
Are you sure are you ready for what you said after that?
Well, let's see it in the name of transparency, in the name of openness. After all, there is an open government, initiative that got the federal government saddled.
Yeah.
So why don't we see that?
Well, so let's leave it there for leadership this morning.
And travel to the Daily Times newspaper. Yes, travel. Lead story, power sector contracts. What British firm said about Nigerian government officials. If you're curious, find the story on the second page of the Daily Times newspaper this morning. Right above the nameplate, editorial, partial closure of third mainland bridge. That one continues on page 12 of the Daily Times newspaper this morning. And right here, under the picture you see there, health. COVID-19, Nigeria records 288 new cases, total now 44,129, and deaths 896. Stories on page 3. Politics, PDP, APC in war of words over multi-billion naira deals. That story is on the third page as well. And economy, oil prices fall amid COVID-19 casts shadow over fuel demand pickup, which is also making some people ask, hey, why don't we reduce the cost of the pump price of petrol again?
Well, we'll see how that plays out, really. And by the way, those figures for the NCDC COVID-19 was for August the 3rd. They're new figures, so the Daily Times probably went to press early on that one.
Okay, so I think we've got News Direct just before we go, and then that's what you get there. Buhari blasts service chiefs, says they're best, not good enough. I thought that this is the old one.
Yeah.
This is the recent perspective now.
It's quite different. The statement is different this time around.
But it's that line, Justice Chamberlain noticed.
Okay, it says, plans re-engineering of nation's security agencies. Okay, also operational agencies there. Remember that one there. Virtual meetings, draft policy document is ready. Minister. Oh, okay. So that should be interesting when you just want to see that one there. IGP refutes media reports of alleged involvement in multi-million fraudulent scheme. Ooh, you just wonder how these things keep making the rounds. And oh, by the way, today also, I think they're talking about this group Revolution Now protest. They say you're going to find them in Lagos, Ogun, Abuja, Ondo, Kano, Edo, Oyo, Kwara, Osun, Yobe, Jigawa states. So they say they're keeping tabs, just putting a voice out there, they say. But that is News Direct, and they look at some of the dailies here today. We will be back in just a moment. Stay with us.
The last time the president did not conceal his anger about the declining security situation What he said today was virtually a reaffirmation of what he said the first time. Yes, Mr. President said, you are doing your best as far as I'm concerned, but there's still a lot more to be done. I am more concerned about the promise we made to the larger Nigerian society, and I am ordering an immediate re-engineering of the entire security apparatus. And this is something that I believe will be done in a very short time.
All right, welcome back. Well, there you have the NSA speaking about the meeting, the recent meeting they had with the president. Well, don't forget that earlier, in the last communication from the NSA, he had said, and that's in briefing as well, telling Nigerians that the president did say that the best that's from service chiefs was not good enough and that they had to do a lot more. That's what he was referring to as the last time they spoke. So we're focusing on that this morning. And so we've got retired Brigadier General Sani Usman, who is a former Director of Army Public Relations, joining us from Abuja. Good morning, sir, and thank you for joining us today on the program. Okay, well, yes, at least you've seen him, but you're just going to get set and then join us. So taking it from that perspective, from what the NSA did tell Nigerians about that meeting, it appeared as though security agencies had been playing the ostrich, because if the president now says Nigerians have lost confidence in the system, this speaks volumes. Isn't this what a lot of people had been saying about security in the country a long time ago?
Can you please, good morning. Can you please repeat?
Can you hear us at least? Can you hear us?
Question. Yeah, I can hear you now.
Okay. Well, the comments from the NSA, quite a number of Nigerians who say, we're not surprised at this. But on the part of the security agencies, many would have thought they as well should know some of this. But when he says that they are going to rejig the security system, from your understanding, what does this mean?
Basically, I think he made use of two words, rejig and re-engineering, which is the same thing with almost recalibrating the security architecture. And every Nigerian is quite aware of the fact that the security situation in the country is not the way it should be. So these concerns permeate all segments of the Nigerian society. So it is not surprising that the National Security Council has met and come out with far-reaching decisions, which include what the National Security Advisor has said. And I think what we'll do, we should exercise patience to see what the government mean by those words, rejigging and re-engineering. But by and large, when you said that you are going to do that to security architecture, I think the pertinent questions to ask are the issue of, first, the legal framework. Are they going to tamper with the legal framework, or are they going to tamper with the structure, or are they going to tinker with other aspects? Take, for instance, there are a lot of issues involving equipping, manpower, and so many other things, motivation and morale of the security forces. So basically, we have to exercise patience, give the government a chance to see to what extent such promises will be carried out. But by and large, going back to what you have said earlier on, the truth is that even the security agencies were quite aware of some of the challenges. And I believe it stems from the fact that we are fighting war in this country. And a lot of people are not aware of that fact. And therefore, there is a need to have a holistic approach. It is just not the kinetic. There are other issues involved. Take, for instance, to what extent other segments of the Nigerian society are carried on board. Because you need to carry the total population of the total Nigerian population on board when you are talking about security. It is agreed there are lead agencies, there are agencies of the government, there are security chiefs, but it's a collective responsibility. So a lot of things, I believe, will unfold as time goes on.
Okay, but part of this is that now the National Assembly, everybody knows this, they have also said, let the service chiefs just take a bow and go. That, look, they've done as much as they can. Now, the president is saying that Nigerians have lost confidence in that system, that they need to rejig it. So even if they rejig it, is it going to be presided over by the same service chief? So why is there that reluctance to let the service chiefs go? So if you're going to rejig all the way through.
First and foremost, I don't speak for the government, neither do I speak for the President Commander-in-Chief. It is his prerogative to hire and fire his security services chiefs as he deems fit. Then secondly, I think we are playing too much politics with security issues in this country. There are clear, division of powers between the judiciary, the executive, and of course the legislature. At what extent will the National Assembly delve into the roles that are exclusive preserve of the executive is entirely a different thing. But I can understand their concern, but they should also respect the fact that the president reserved the rights to work with whoever he deems fit, unless of course when it comes to their role of confirmation, if they have any other thing, they have to raise on observation. I think what the security chiefs need now, and everybody, I think all hands has to be on deck. The military particularly need all the support, understanding, and encouragement they require. And I don't think there is anybody that will not be doing the best he could in any way he deemed fit to do that. So basically, these are the issues. If you look at it, it is not just the security sector in this country that is having problem. There are so many other, parts of the Nigerian societies that are having problem. So, but we need to look at the issue of strategy. We have to look at those things that we have not been doing right and see how best we can. But most importantly, it must be people-centric.
We also have a security consultant joining us this morning, Alfred Ononugbo. First of all, when you heard that the federal government, the president has said that there is a need for us to rejig the entire security apparatus of the nation, first of all, whose responsibility would that be? And what exactly would you think needs to be rejigged? This is not the first time we are hearing this. So when we hear rejig or re-engineer the entire security apparatus, whose responsibility is it, and what exactly do you think should be re-engineered?
First of all, thank you for having me on. I'd like to give my deepest compliments to the statesman and one of the security institutions in Nigeria. My compliments, sir. I feel it's the exclusive responsibility of the Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. It falls on the President. Also, the fact that he has a political platform and he's running a political manifesto, he promised Nigerians that he would deliver safety at their doorsteps, puts a very high responsibility on Mr. President. However, I feel strongly that we seem to be combing the problems on the surface. This is about heightened risk management. The state of the Nigerian system has been traumatized over a period of time, right back to 1966 when we had the military push. A lot of things have gone out to the public, breaking the bonds of patriotism, removing Nigeria as a common project, and we've pursued diverse interests since then. Unfortunately, in 2020, it has metamorphosed into a monster of, I don't know the words, but it's difficult to capture. Now there is very serious security challenge to the point that a good analyst will understand that Mr. President's statement is an admission that, yes, we've lost it. We are not giving Nigerians the security they deserve. They are not getting the dividend of the political promises. So I think we have to look at a wider scope of the challenge. The Nigerian people remain the beneficiaries or the victims of these security instabilities. And we should take a deeper look at the structures of governance. The people in the army, the soldiers, the policemen, we're all Nigerians. And we came through a system. So if we come through a disintegrated system and structure, if people are not taking ownership of the assignments they are given to do on behalf of Nigerians for the benefit of Nigerians, then we might be having a greater challenge. No matter how politically correct we might sound.
Let me come in here. Let me come in here briefly and just try to maybe put this another way, because when you hear the statement, re-engineering of the entire security apparatus, you kind of wonder what that means. What should we expect? And the question here is there like a standard? Is there a standard definition of re-engineering the entire security apparatus? Is there a generally acceptable standard, or it's contextual in this case? I think that's the question. What should we be expecting? What areas should we be looking at?
It's more of a contextual commitment by the president. Every system have their own SOPs, standard operational systems that it runs on its own. They've gone through trainings. There are standard training programs that produces the men and women of the services. So what we need to look at are the underlying elements that have, that have affected their operations. If we can identify these challenges, then I would now take it that should be the re-engineering we are trying to address. But anything further from that will just be another effort in futility, because there are some challenges embedded in the system as they run today. Probably in the course of the discussion, we might have reasons to mention them. Some are pretty sensitive. There are things that we have brought into the culture of service in Nigerian security systems that are totally harmful to the operations of that system, and I think that should be addressed.
You know what, let's just explore those challenges quickly before I go back to Abuja, because you've started on that note, and let's just tackle this headlong. What are those challenges, or some of those challenges which you have noticed?
The basic one is the welfare of the men of the service. A lot of them are not fulfilled. They don't have job satisfaction. And the manner and ways they are being treated. For instance, recently, about 300 soldiers of the Nigerian army disengaged, resigned from the service. These were men and women probably who saw their future in the uniformed services, and they are quitting the job. It's a bad signature. People who read and hear these things will begin to think. Secondly, I think the behavior, the governance system have not given the security establishments their proper place. They are being used to serve interests outside their traditional roles. You know, if you go, with due respect to the police, if you go to the police, walk into a police station, it's not what you hear on the media, but interact with these people. They are real people, they are real Nigerians. And many times I follow my friend Frank Mba, the spokesman of the police service. These people need to be motivated. They need to be given tools to work. So they don't have good tools. How can you combat crime when we don't have enough vehicles, enough communication or signal systems? Policing is driven by communications. It's not something you walk through and hold people on the road. We don't have database, a central database that captures everybody that have a history of crime in Nigeria, such that if a crime is committed in Lagos by a person, a Nigerian, and he moves to Niger State and repeats the same crime, the system will capture you, you know. Then the other third thing is also the lifestyle of our leaders. An average political office holder operates more than a police station in his convoy, and Nigerians are left with nothing. How could these people be serving us when they are more protected than the people they serve?
All right,
I don't know if anybody...
Yeah, we'll get that point, but let's just take that, some of your concerns that you've raised to Brigadier General Usman. Are these some of the concerns that you identified when you say, well, they were going to perhaps have some changes and carry a lot of people along? And if they are, if they address these challenges, that if you admit that these challenges exist in the army, maybe you want to speak to that first.
Well, I don't speak for the army, but just like he rightly said, some of these challenges...
Did you notice and observe that these challenges existed?
Yeah, there are challenges, quite right. And that was the basis for the yesterday's National Security Council's meeting and other meetings that were held earlier on daily basis, maybe. But what I'm trying to say is that what he said is quite true. And there are some of these challenges that are peculiar to the services and other security agencies. Take, for instance, he made mention of issue of motivation, and there are also other logistics and what do you call it, equipment. Just when you look at the theater of operation, for instance, in the Northeast, you look at the size of that area and the proliferation of all the insurgents and the terrorists there, you need more boots on the ground. Then secondly, modern technology or warfare, particularly this aspect of warfare, requires certain sophisticated equipment. But most importantly, again, it is a people's war. Holistically, we need to mobilize the totality of the Nigerian society to make sure that these issues are common to all, and we speak with the same, one voice, and the troops should be motivated, should be appreciated, should be commended. Take, for instance, people hardly understand that from the theater commander Operation Lafia Adole, for instance, up to the last man in the trenches, each one of them is just on 1,000 naira per day. But now, at least it has been, upgraded to 2,000 naira per day. But is that enough? What are the remunerations? Because there are some people that have not even seen their families maybe for the past 2 years or more. Now, you will come and you'll be talking to them as if their lives do not matter, as if their sacrifices are not enough, and as if they are the people that cause the problem, when they are trying hard, sacrificing their lives, to bring solutions to the problems. These and many more are some of the issues that are peculiar to the system. But let's even go back. If you look at it, the basis of all these problems, I think we have neglected completely our policing system. From 1999 to date, which is almost 21 years now, you can look at it. What was the input of the government in terms of manpower holding of the police, training of the police, equipping of the police, and what are those standard operational procedures that he has mentioned, the roles of the police, and to what extent has society assisted, to what extent has the government assisted. These are some of the issues that we'll be looking at. And at the same time, again, the national security strategy that was launched recently clearly defined roles for each component of the Nigerian society. To what extent has the Nigerian society been galvanized, to take a front row or rightful step, position to contribute their quota? Is it in terms of intelligence gathering? Is it in terms of support for government? Okay. And understanding these issues at hand. So we have to do a lot of things, and these are some of the things.
Could you just, because when you say that it's about from 1,000 to 2,000 naira per day for those who are in the front lines, that's shocking to a lot of people who will hear that. And then they wonder, how long has this been going on for? I mean, there was this I think it's $1 billion, which is approved for the fight against insurgency. So didn't they raise concerns about the allowances of those on the front lines when all of this was happening?
The truth is that I made mention earlier on we should stop politicizing security matters in this country. It has to be taken very seriously. There shouldn't be differences when it comes to security of Nigerians and those residing in this country. So the issue of remunerations, the issue of appropriations should be timely, should be when you allocate such funds, they should be released and they should be given to the appropriate persons, and there should be a mechanism of monitoring and evaluating to what extent that money has been used for that purpose.
That also raises another issue here, General. You have talked about remuneration, you have talked about politicization, and you have talked about equipment for the security agencies, and you have actually been generous in talking about the police and the military as well. Which of these issues do you say that unless we deal with this, there is no moving forward? Is it the political aspect of it, or the financial, the funding aspect of it, or the equipment for the men and the officers on duty, whether in the army or the police? Which one are we missing out on?
Well, I think it's the whole gamut of it. I made mention that some of these problems are peculiar to the services. When I talked about services, I'm talking about the armed forces and the various security agencies. Some of the challenges, being experienced by the Nigerian police force, for instance, are quite different with what the armed forces are, experiencing. But by and large, if you look at, again, the security challenges, each one of it has its own peculiarity. Let's take, for instance, the fight against terrorism and insurgency, particularly in the northern part of Borno State, So what are the challenges? What are the problems? We need more manpower on the ground, and we need more equipment. And of course, other services had to be equally involved and equipped. Take, for instance, the Lake Chad region. Since the attack on Baga in December 2018, to what extent have we equipped the Navy to take rightful position to deal with the security challenges on those tumbos, on those islands facing the Lak province of Lake Chad? And then again, whenever the military were able to, carry out operations and were able to ransack the terrorists out of an environment, the first thing to do is to ensure that the area is safe. And how do you make sure that
just hold on a moment, hold on a minute.
All the rest,
we'll come back to you. We'll come back to you to conclude your thoughts when we return from this break. Please stay with us.
President Muhammadu Buhari has been very supportive of the armed forces, and having appointed the service chiefs himself, it seems poised to be a perfectly symbiotic relationship, as guaranteeing security was one of the promises the president made to Nigerians in his election campaigns. However, a recent wave of insecurity in the northern part of the country, including an attack on the convoy of the governor of Borno State, Babagana Zulum, is showing perhaps that all is not well.
What happened is that the shooting that has happened this evening is not from Boko Haram.
There is.
If that is the case, then we are defeated.
No, we have cleared them.
1,181 soldiers and 75 officers. We cannot go into a town that has no more than 10 Boko Haram inside.
Following renewed calls for the sack of the service chiefs, the National Assembly added its voice to the clamor.
Those against any. Thank you very much.
This prompted a reaction from the presidency, who reminded them that any such decision was in the president's purview. And the recurring banditry, kidnapping and insurgency, including the execution of 5 aid workers in Maiduguri by Boko Haram, meant reactions kept coming from all quarters. The latest call by the president for an overhaul of the security architecture appears to be an indication of dissatisfaction with the situation and perhaps what to expect in the not-too-distant future.
Welcome back. Let's continue with the conversation now. General Osman, could you go ahead? You conclude your thought before we put in the next one, please.
Talking about, equipping the Navy and other security agencies. And beyond that, again, remember when towns like Bama, Mapa, Dikwa, and the rest of them were recaptured, beyond the presence of the military, there was gradual, deployment of government machinery, starting with other security agencies, talking about the police, civil defense, and what have you. So these are also supposed to be followed, gradually taking position, because there is a difference between, being present in the theater and maintaining, operational control, especially in asymmetric warfare. It is entirely a different ballgame. You might have the number. If you don't have the right equipment, you might not be able to control the territory. Then, again, when you look at the northwestern part of the country, the banditry that is ravaging some parts, thankfully, the military has risen to the occasion based on the directive of Mr. President. But there is still much that needs to be done in terms of, putting more boots on the ground and now synergy of efforts between the security agencies and the Nigerian society in terms of information, sharing, in terms of support.
Okay, we'll let you speak a little bit on that in a moment, but could you tell us, because I remember while you were a spokesman in the army, I think you were on the national TV where you said that the $1 billion that had been approved by NEC was still, by President, was still being processed. So before you left, do you know if any part of that money or all of it has been released?
Well, I'm not too sure, but the truth as of that time was the fact that none of the armed forces has seen a dime as of that time. To what extent it has been released and used, honestly, I have no idea. But I believe if there is anything like that, definitely you would have seen it on the ground, and the government will definitely, talked about it. And of course, the recipient themselves would have talked about it and, of course, show what they have, bearing security considerations, appreciating the fact that this money is making the desired impact. But I think, I believe the military or the beneficiaries will be in a better position to answer that question. It will be good if it is released also.
Absolutely. Now, let's get back to Mr. Alfred Ononugbo. And, On one hand, you have the statement from the president. Now, this is the second time we've had this in the space of 2-3 months, saying that, the service chiefs are doing their best. And you stop short to say their best is not good enough this time around, saying that more needs to be done. And on the other hand, you have the reality on ground. And take, for instance, a few days ago, the governor of Borno State, his convoy was ambushed, for example. Take another instance, the killings in southern Kaduna. And people are wondering, when they hear statements like they're doing their best, but when they look around, they see the security challenge. I wonder, what is the strategy here? Why do we keep hearing that statement, they're doing their best, when it appears as though that is not what we see in reality?
Well, first of all, it depends on who is speaking. One does not expect the spokespersons of the armed forces to accept failure. On the other hand, the victims should be able to say, oh, yes, to the extent we understand, we feel secured. And when there is a reoccurrence of a particular pattern of attack on people, and you are telling them you are doing your best, the question is, are you doing anything at all? The attack on the governor just a few days ago is just one out of many. And what bothers me is the fact that the governor has a cocktail of security. There's intelligence agencies operating within the governor's convoy. Every government house have all the services fully represented. And I expect that the level of intelligence, both within the governor's government house and the state entirely, should be able to identify unusual activities and movements. But this is not happening. And apparently that's why a governor of a state could run into an ambush. Now, the other fear I have, and these are sensitive things, sometimes coming public with them have implications, is that could our system be compromised? Is it possible the system have been infiltrated? Are there possible saboteurs? These are questions someone needs to find answers to. We might not have the answers readily there, but there could be some compromise, there could be some elements of sabotage, there also could be just incapability to discharge expected services that people have been engaged to do. Take, for instance, when I look at the process of engaging people in the service and administration within some of the services, it's not based on merit. And I'm one of the advocates that in the security structures, we should jettison quota system. We are destroying the spirit of the service with this kind of approach in engagement. So it's a serious concern. The Kaduna killings have gone on for as long as I can remember. It's not just about Boko Haram or Fulani headsmen or any other thing, but it's been a consistent, recurrent engagement that we've come to live with. And I think it's spreading beyond Kaduna. It's happening in Plateau, it happens in Benue, it happens in Nasarawa, and as you move up, Gombe, Bauchi, and up to Sokoto, you see these things happening. So I think we must take a holistic look at what the problems are.
Now, speaking of holistic, the last time in June when we had this meeting and the NSA spoke, he referenced the Minister of Defense saying that there's a policy that has been put in place and it's being looked at. And just yesterday, again, he mentioned the Minister of Defense, and he says that, there are plans on ground and Nigerians should rest assured that these plans will manifest and lead to better security. So speaking holistically, because you expect the Minister of Defense to have this, sort of oversight, have this holistic approach to what is happening, not just with the service chiefs, talking about the Nigerian Army, the Navy, what have you, but also the police. What should be the role of the Minister of Defense in all of this?
Without being disrespectful, let me state that most times some of the political appointees are really not in touch with the realities of the system. They function based on briefings. most of them do not know where the closest barrack to their residence are. So, but also to be fair to them, probably that's the level of their understanding. You don't expect someone that had no background knowledge of a service to give what he does not have. You can't give what you don't have. And I would like to appeal to Mr. President that in making choice of people to occupy certain offices, consideration should be given to the antecedents and service records. That should help to integrate the activities of that office and the realities on ground. The ministers and some of the people who occupy offices hardly relate with the everyday security man on the street. So we need to bridge that gap. We need to bridge that gap. And the only
just one moment, Mr.
competent...
Honorable. Does this
Yes.
then suggest, or rather, would you suggest then that, you know, there is credence in the appeal that many people have been making around that the service chiefs should be relieved, that they should be allowed to go if they are not in touch with the realities as you have suggested?
Not just the service chiefs, a lot of the people wearing ranks in the service should go home. I'm sorry to use that word. A lot, not all of them. I want to be balanced in my statement.
Now, that also asks another question, and this is for the both of you gentlemen. Insecurity is local, and the governors themselves seem helpless about, you know, these challenges at the state level, and most of the strategies we're talking about at the national level. Would you say that we have over-centralized security issues in Nigeria to the center?
Oh, certainly. I believe in community policing because I know the people in my community. I know the people I see smoking and drinking by 10 a.m. in the morning when I'm going to work or going to meet a client. So we must encourage community policing and give them resources. Because the problem we have here is that we often create institutions without the necessary infrastructures and logistics to run them. Just like General was saying.
All right.
We have these things. People are there, but they don't have the capability, resource-wise and logistics to put it through.
All right then. Now, let me take this to General Sonny. The other time you were also talking about these things. Would you say, General, that we have over-centralized security? I'm taking this to Abuja now. Would you say that we have over-centralized security and that we need to do something about that, decentralize to the states and the local so that they can also be able to tackle the issues that you say are peculiar to their various states?
The truth is that I don't think that we have over-centralized. It's the issue of implementation and implementation of policies using the strategies identified. Take, for instance, the issue of community policing. It's a phenomenon that has been with us for almost 13 years now, but it has not been implemented. And I know way back 2018, when I was a participant at National Institute for Policy and Strategic Studies, we told parts of the Nigerian society. We went to some parts of Africa and the world, and there were best practices that they have a centralized system. India, Italy, even Ghana here, they have centralized system, but they have policies that are working, that are being followed through, and there is a political will. So we made a recommendation. It may surprise you to know that we have provision, a constitutional provision for police council. Okay? Police council has never sat, not till when we made recommendation to the President Commander-in-Chief. Now, if you look at what constitutes that council, each of the state governors is a member of the police council. So had it been that it's meeting regularly, all this agitation for, state police and what have you, wouldn't have even come forward. I mean, come up. Why? Because all the security challenges, all the issues identified are tabled, discussed, and solutions provided, and everybody will go back and do his or her own bit as the case may be. But in most cases, we don't do that. Despite the recommendation, it is only few states that are doing it. Some are toying with the idea of vigilante and so many other security outfits. When the community policing work seamlessly well in Ghana, in Italy, in so many other countries, particularly Ghana, when you go to Nima, when you go to Zango, we have seen it. It worked. And of course, here in the Nigerian society, you know, in the days, even with the native authorities and what have you, you know, there was community policing, intelligence gathering, just like he rightly said. Everybody is kind of security conscious to the point that before a problem comes up, it will be identified and nipped in the bud. And if it happens, it won't take long. The perpetrators
General,
of the problem,
we need to wrap up at this
security
time.
breach will be apprehended.
We do thank you for your thoughts, retired Brigadier General Sani Usman, and also former Director, Army Public Relations, as well as Alfred Ononugo, who is a security analyst. Thank you both for talking to us this morning. All right, we'll be back in a moment. We'll turn our attention to another matter. Please stay with us.
Representatives of various broadcast organizations, journalists and staff of the National Broadcasting Commission gathered for the unveiling of the amended 6th edition of the National Broadcasting Code. The Minister of Information and Culture leads the unveiling.
Highlights of the amendments include but are not limited to the following: the provisions on exclusivity and monopoly. This antitrust provision will boost local content and local industry.
He also took out time to commend broadcast organizations that have been giving time for national emergencies just before dropping the bombshell.
Another highlight of the amendment is the provision that has raised the fine for hate speeches and divisive messages from ₦500,000 naira to ₦5 million naira. We believe that this will serve as a deterrent to those who want to use our broadcast stations to sow seed of discord. Our attention remains the good of the country. We need to catalyze the growth of the local industry.
Shortly after unveiling the amended broadcasting code, stakeholders met virtually to discuss the issues raised by the amendment.
There's a bit of a clash there in terms of how businesses, how investors can benefit from the code vis-a-vis, what the code is doing to protect the local industry.
Most broadcasters are now have collaborations with foreign media. To have those collaborations, we need to assure them that their rights are safe and secure. We will struggle to do that now because we cannot tell them that it will not be broadcast everywhere across different from our platform, nor can we guarantee revenue if the revenues will be regulated by the NBC.
The Acting Director General of the NBC allays fears of breakups.
There is a misassumption that the new provisions are compulsive. There is nowhere in the provisions of the amendment where we have said that there must be compulsory deal. We are simply saying that when you go to acquire rights or where you want to invest in Nigeria, we have a national philosophy, national ideology that encourages that you make these rights available to as many Nigerians that are interested.
The NBC insists there are opportunities for constant review of the code, but advised all stakeholders to note that this amendment is signed, sealed and delivered, and the Commission is committed to making it work for the good of the country. Neo Taigbe, Channels Television News.
All right, welcome back. Well, we're going to talk about some items that were raised in that report. Well, this morning we've got Professor Tony Iradia, who is a professor of broadcast management and media law. It's of the Igbenedion University, Okada. Is a formerly head of Department of Mass Communication, Nasarawa State University, KEFI, former DG of NTA, former DG of NOA. Good morning, sir, and thank you for joining us today on the program.
Thank you very much.
Well, Prof, let's start off with concerns raised about, there's a lot about the management and regulation of the industry, but there's this concern which just looms large when they had to talk about fines for hate speeches in that revised broadcast code. It's given so many people a lot of concern, raising it from, 500,000 to 5 million, much as they've said, look, those who have challenges should come forward with it. But hearing that alone, what were your initial thoughts?
Well, thank you very much, Chamberlain. I have always felt that the reason we are having problems these days is because private participation has now been allowed in the broadcast field. Several years ago, when some of us were in this business and we were like a monopoly, these regulations were not this stringent and they were not this frequent. So the fallout is that government is always trying to regulate the media in such a way as to prevent dissenting opinions to be in the public domain. That's the only way one can see the reason for these conflicts here and there since 1992 that the private people came into this business. The NBC has become a very strong policeman pursuing the broadcasters every day for one thing or the other. I think that we need to ask ourselves the basis of broadcasting. What's the function? Why do we set up broadcast stations? Is it, for example, to generate revenue? Of course, no. Is it so as to penalize, defaulters? Of course, no. It is to enlighten the public, to make sure that the public is able to understand what is going on in society, to ensure, for example, in politics, that all sides of the subject are well brought out for the public to be able to make reasoned decisions that can influence what they do. But by the time we begin to over-regulate the way we do in Nigeria, we're going to create problems for the industry. You find out that members of the National Assembly are anxious to bring new laws as if the laws on the ground are not enough. The executive is making new fines. If you make a hate speech, you pay 5 million instead of 500,000. All of a sudden, and the impression that is given is that this is intended to stop, conflicts in society and all of that. That is not what will stop conflicts. The best thing that can stop conflict is open government, good governance, allowing everybody to feel free. That is the meaning of democracy. Allowing the majority to have their way, but allowing the minority to have their say. This idea of wanting to stop people from talking is what is pushing this regulation overboard. The last NBC code that has caused all these problems is a special type. We never had that in the past. In my own time, the broadcasting code was seen as a professional guide for professionals in the industry. Now it is like a regulatory law that if you do this, this is what is going to happen to you. If you do this, pushing fears into the minds of practitioners. And I don't think that augurs well for public enlightenment and political education. Because in developing society like this, you can still see that a lot of people don't even vote. Those who vote don't know how to vote, and they spoil their ballot. So there is a lot of voter education that needs to be done. And you need the media for all of this.
Okay,
By
Prof.
the time there are so many rules
Pardon me to butt in, Prof.
them today,
we'll come back to you and talk more. Pardon me, we'll talk more about some of these matters when we return in just a moment. Please stay with us.
Another highlight of the amendment is the provision that has raised the fine for hate speeches and divisive messages from $500,000 naira to 5 million naira. We believe that this will serve as a deterrent to those who want to use our broadcast stations to sow seed of discord. From the above, it is clear that it is a regulatory function to establish the code. Is democratic when the regulator engages stakeholders to get their views. The broadcasting code is not a static document. As we often say, broadcasting is dynamic. Therefore, even the 6th edition of the code shall be reviewed at the appropriate time. Our attention remains the good of the country. We need to catalyze the growth of the local industry. We need to create jobs for our teeming creative youths. The opportunities must be created, and we believe that effective regulatory interventions are a sure way of attaining this. That is why we will not waver.
Let's continue with our conversation with Professor Tony Redia. He joins us live from our Abuja studio. And, looking at the headlines this morning and how, the media is reporting, or some section of the media is reporting this, you'd see headlines like, despite industry-wide opposition, the government launches controversial NBC code. You see, Lai Mohammed, NBC ignores stakeholders and unveils NBC code. And I know that the minister did say that there was some form of consultation, in fact, wide consultation with stakeholders. But it appears as though that did not happen. And I know that you're in the know as to how these things went. What do you have to say about the consultations that went into this, the latest, update regarding the NBC code?
Well, thank you very much. When this code was coming on, the broadcasting organizations of Nigeria actually contacted me to serve like a kind of consultant on the issue because of the controversy it was generating. Now, the problem really is that for the first time in the history of broadcasting in this country, the code was not done the way it used to be done. This time around, NBC just rolled out a number of things that it felt should be in the code and did not hold consultations with the stakeholders as the previous managers of the system did, where you first of all hold consultation, everybody will look at it, there will be a dummy, you bring it out at the tail end, there will still be another kinds of peer review and all of that. Just like I said at the beginning, the code was supposed to be a professional guide. It was supposed to be a masterpiece that creates professional excellence in broadcasting. But now it is filled with sanctions and what you will do and what you will not do. And the bodies that should have been consulted were not consulted in the same way. Rather, they were being told that it is subject to review and that all their objections now will be taken into consideration in the next review. In which case, this particular edition was not exactly a broadcasting code for broadcasters, made by broadcasters for professionals. So, and that has been the problem. And I'm not surprised at the kind of headlines that are on today. Besides, there is a really problem. Everybody expects a broadcasting commission to be an autonomous body that has no place in politics. If you listen to the news that you have been putting on since, who is speaking? The Minister of Information. Is he the Director General of the NBC? You see, when the minister is speaking, there's no way broadcasters can see that the regulator is speaking. He's not a regulator. He should leave the broadcasters in the NBC to do their professional duty. And then the law gives him right to supervise them, but not to take over the job. The moment the minister is speaking, no matter how well-intentioned he may be, the people become suspicious because he belongs to a political divide. And whatever he's saying is likely to be used against the opposition. And I think this is a natural thing. It's not about criticizing anybody. Now take the issue of fake news that has been overplayed in the last couple of weeks. We were all in this country a few days ago, or I think the last week, when a minister told the nation that contracts in the NDDC were being grabbed by legislators. The legislators now challenged him to bring the list. The next thing the minister said was that he didn't say so. We heard him saying so. We heard him saying he didn't say so. Now, between the time he said so and the time he said he didn't say so, broadcasters had gone on air to say what he said, which is now fake news. Who is guilty now? Is it the media? Is it the minister? Is it the politics of broadcasting? What exactly is it? The point I'm trying to make is that fake news, hate speech, they are very subjective terminologies, and one has to be very careful because some people will take criticism as hate speech. You can't, criticism is not hate speech. It is when somebody is saying something that is really defamatory and all of that, that you can say is wrong. Even at that, the laws are there. Even the old defamation law of 1961 is still valid today. It has not been abrogated. The provisions are there for what you say. When what a station is saying is true, you cannot be saying you are defamed because the truth cannot defame you. If somebody is saying the truth, it cannot be defamatory. So we have to understand some of these things that are being emphasized in the system. And if we can reduce these heated up arguments, then we'll have some little way to do it. And you go back to Nigerian broadcasting system. You ask yourself a basic question. Why is it that the opposition political parties are always happy with the media? Or rather, when a party is in the opposition, the party is happy with the media. The ruling party of today was with the media in 2015. Everything was okay with the media for the ruling party today. Now, today, the opposition today is now the friend of the media. Why is it so? Because the opposition sees the media as the only channel for ventilating grievances. And so they want to talk to power. Power does not want any talk. And then we pretend that what we are trying to do is we are trying to stop hate speech. We are trying to stop fake news. Nobody doubts the fact that fake news is bad. Nobody doubts the fact that hate speech can dismember a society. We have all of that. Even the old law of sedition is still there. Even though the courts have shut it down, it's still being used. When you see people, where a journalist has written something against a governor, he's locked up. Is that what democracy is supposed to be about? So I think we need to look at some of these issues thoroughly and get back again to the system. The Nigerian broadcasting system has become so commercialized. You see, the people who are the ones making broadcasting to work are being threatened with different fines. Even the one that is not called a fine, the licensing fee and other charges, they are so high that stations cannot really make up any profit whatsoever. So what is the purpose of having broadcasting if we are going to strangulate them? And so we push the broadcasters into a system in which everything is now paid for. Even what is news, broadcasters are charging for it. And people are shouting, why are they charging for news? Where then do they get the funds to meet all the charges that the regulator is placing on them? I think that these issues have to be clearly put in perspective so that we can have really a broadcast system that educates, entertains, and informs society.
Prof, does that mean that broadcasters are helpless? Is there anything they can do to take on the minister and the NBC about this issue of exorbitant fees? Because what you have referenced now is definitely something all broadcast organizations are experiencing. You've just talked about one, which is this increment of 500,000 to 5 million naira, and you have also referenced licensing fees. Is there anything the broadcasters can do to interface with government or the NBC or the minister to bring these fees down and let them at least see the reason? Because most certainly it's all about the business or economic environment or investment environment in Nigeria.
Well, thank you. In ideal situations, I don't see why there's nothing that can be done. I don't agree that broadcasters are helpless in an ideal situation where the environment is clean. But in the Nigerian context, one can almost become so disillusioned in saying that maybe broadcasters are helpless. But notwithstanding that, I think efforts should be made. I have been at the forefront of calling for a review of the NBC Act. We have not done anything about it. Now, you see, the way the NBC Act is made is very open to abuse. In other parts of the world, the regulator is an independent entity. It has nothing to do with political authorities. Nobody influences it. Now, when you don't have that foundation, that legal foundation that gives what I would call credibility and belief by people who are operating with you, you are going to have a problem. A system in which the NBC itself, the way it is presently constituted, it cannot find those broadcast stations that are pro-government. It can't. It cannot shut down a broadcast station that is pro-government. When you see the NBC shouting about shutting down a station, be rest assured that that station is probably pro-opposition. I don't even believe that any station should be pro-anyone, because the essence of broadcasting really is balance and objectivity. But at the same time, we all have a suspicion that if the proprietor of a particular station has a political, affiliation, is more likely going to be tilted that way. And so we begin to even look for faults where there are no faults. So I think the first thing to do is to get the broadcasting law reviewed. Now, why do I think that there's some level of helplessness? Who is going to review the law? Is it the National Assembly that is itself wanting to even make more laws on social media? We are in an international environment. What is happening elsewhere? Why can't it happen here? When every day 2 different laws are being made now on anti-social media and so on and so on. Is Nigeria the only country where social media is ruling or running? The other day one governor said, oh, the Chinese or somebody shut it down. We are talking about democracy and somebody is talking about dictators. We're talking about freedom. So my point is that the broadcasters should not lose hope. They should continue to make their point. They are entitled to influencing the enactment of a bill. They are entitled to reaching people. And because actually broadcasters run the media, which are powerful organs, they should be able to use these organs appropriately. If by the time you are asking government or whoever wants to speak to pay the same proportion of increase that we have now as fines, maybe they will begin to understand that broadcasting is costly. But if you continue to use your rate cards and government is saying something should move from 500,000 to 5 million, your rate card should move by that same ratio so that people will now know what is happening, the way it happens in other places. But besides, I think that we have to also know that in terms of deterrence, which the minister spoke about, there is nothing to show that people will be deterred. We are assuming that the only medium where people can do fake news or where people can do hate speech is broadcasting. It's not so. Politics is on now in 2 states. People are doing all kinds of hate speeches and fake news in rallies. Not even on the screen, in rallies. And people are hearing them. Are those ones not fake news? Are those ones not hate speech? What is the fine for that? Because the greatest victim, the greatest culprit in fake news is the politician. It is the politician that will say something and say he didn't say it. It's the politician that will instigate a news item and then disown it. So at the end of the day, we are punishing the messenger. You know, we're not looking at the proprietor who owns the message, the person who initiated it, the originator of the issues that are at stake. We're not looking at it. We're just behaving as if the only venue where Nigerians hear anything is radio and television, which is not true. So many things are happening elsewhere.
Let me ask you, Prof.
In the media.
You know,
so I expect that we should be able to allow the media to function.
Okay. Now, one other issue that is of equal importance in this entire management of the broadcast industry has got to be self-regulation. Where does this leave self-regulation if we're grappling with some of these laws now?
Well, you see, in the print media, for example, there has been a big quarrel between the journalists of the print and the Nigerian Press Council. And the courts have even said that they should allow journalists to self-regulate. But the truth is that nobody believes that the Nigerian media has grown to the level. In fact, people believe that the Nigerian media is a mischievous class. And we're not even giving it a chance to grow. Yet, Nigeria is probably the only country that has media written in its constitution and gave it a mandate and a function to carry out. Because we know that it will be difficult to carry so many things to the court, the Nigerian Constitution in Section 22 asks the media to be the police of governance. They ask the media to ensure that leaders are accountable to the people. Now, if those who have been given the power to ensure that leaders are accountable to the people are being controlled by those leaders, how do they make leaders accountable to the people? So we need a free media. We don't have it. In other parts of the world, we don't have the kind of problem that we're having today. There's so much regulation, so much law, so much penalty, and so on and so forth. Now, let's look at what is happening in the rest of the world. Today, what everybody is doing is digital broadcasting. That is digitization of the broadcast system. Digitization rests on 2 legs. One, the technologies, the technical facilities that you need for the transition. The second leg is broadcast content. Now, the difference between analog and digital broadcasting is that the digital broadcasting requires a lot of content because it has a lot of space. The little spectrum that you could put 2-3 programs in the analog system can take 20-25 programs in the digital system. What that means is that there must be abundance in content development and production. Now, what has Nigeria done about it? We have not done anything about producing content to fit into the expectations of digitization. No. Today, we don't have independent producers who are recognized by law. The NBC is registering stations as content providers. They are not registering independent producers as content providers. How do stations provide enough content to meet the expectations of digitization? Even in the analog system, if you watch our television stations, they have so many repeat programs because they don't have enough content. These are the kinds of things that should bother the NBC as a professional regulatory body that will ensure that the latest that is going on in the rest of the world is also happening in Nigeria. We are not bothered about content development, which is what is really needed. Today, we should be able to have specialist programs. We should be able to tune to Parliament and look at everything that is happening in Parliament. We should be able to tune to other things and have them as separate and direct boxes. But we don't have them. We don't even have enough programs. Many of our stations outside of the capital, that is outside of Abuja and Lagos, many of them close at 11 p.m. You don't close a station at 11 p.m. because that is like a cinema house. If you are a broadcast station, you should run 24 hours. How do you run 24 hours? You can only run 24 hours if you are repeating so many programs. You can only run 24 hours if you have sufficient resources to buy diesel in a country where the public power supply is not working. And these challenges are what should be uppermost in the minds of those who are asked to regulate broadcasting, who are asked to ensure that Nigerians enjoy broadcasting. That should be what should be uppermost on them. But the problem is that they are not even given a chance to do those things. They are called here and there every day. Oh, go and do this. Oh, we watched one program today and it's not good. They go and shut that station down.
Okay, Prof, when we return, we'd like you to give us your concluding thoughts on what the National Assembly should be doing about some of these situations. That's in just a moment. Please stay with us. Welcome back. Well, we're winding down now. So, Prof, tell us, I mean, the National Assembly do have a huge responsibility. What should they be doing about some of these laws to ensure that the industry is there for what it should be?
Well, thank you very much. It's very simple. One of the things that I've always canvassed and which I think is still begging for action is creating an autonomous regulator. We don't have that now. Now, the present situation is that the NBC is just an agent of the regulator. It's not really the regulator. It cannot grant license. It can only recommend that licenses be granted. Okay. Secondly, the same NBC that cannot grant licenses is empowered by law to withdraw those licenses which it does not have power to grant. So you can see that NBC is just being used. But a proper NBC would not have any problem. As it is today, the organization has an acting director general who is a technocrat and who knows what to do. If you leave that type of person there, you have already started in the right direction. The second thing you do is to dissolve the NBC board and bring in non-partisan people, as it is elsewhere. This is not a new thing. UNESCO had said this over 20 years ago, that the best way to regulate broadcasting is to have non-partisan regulators. When you have somebody who has partisan interests, he can't regulate because he's going to be looking for how to butter the bread of his party. So, and it's understandable. Anybody will do that. We are not talking about the current people. If you even change it, if the present ruling class goes to opposition, the new people will do what these present ones are doing. So the way out is create a non-partisan regulator. Also, tidy up the NBC law. As it is today, we don't really know who does what. Section 2 of the law setting up the NBC gives the power to Mr. President to grant licenses. Section 9 also gives the power to NBC to grant licenses. Who is the grantor? Who is the agent? So there are certain ambiguities in the law that can easily be put right. If we just look at what they are all about, I don't see somebody who has power to give what he does not have. So the NBC does not have any license to give. So it should not be seen as somebody giving license. If we want to empower NBC the way it is in other parts of the world, let's empower NBC and have a proper NBC that can regulate and remove the idea of a minister who is a political appointee taking over the day-to-day administration of regulation. Nobody is going to believe in it because he's a politician. It doesn't matter which party he belongs. Another minister of information will do what he's doing now. So let's have a non-partisan body that can run the system in such a manner that all of us will be happy. Now, the NBC itself should return to the olden system that we had in my own time, where the NBC code is a collaborative venture between the regulator and the practitioners. They sit down to agree on this is the best practice in the industry today. Let's abide by it. Secondly, the NBC can also lead by example. They can also stop this idea of the punitive approach to management. Rather than, oh, this is what you are going to pay if you do this, why don't you also change it and say, this is what you win when you do not have any infraction? Why can't we institute a reward for good broadcasting and say, well, this station has done so well. Every year we hear, oh, channels has won this, has won that. What has government given to channels for winning all those? So there should be something that you do that will make the broadcaster recognize that, oh, a lot of responsibility has been placed on me. I have to behave well. I have to act well. But when you hold the stick all the time and you say, oh, if you do this, this is what is going to happen. If you do it, they begin to look for ways to do it. Like in the reason why the government has increased 500,000 to 5 million now is because there are some politicians who will allow you to make an infraction, give you the 500,000 to pay when they find you. And so the infraction continues. Okay. So by raising it to 5 million, you are assuming that will deter people. Well, that 5 million will not deter Nigerian politicians. If you make it 10 million, there will still be infractions because they are desperate to run down the opposition or to run down the opponent. So in that way, those things will not work. So the best thing is to get the NBC to be strong. Have a technocrat, have non-partisan board members, ensure that the code is a professional guide that will be seen that once you breach it, it's like you have committed a professional blunder.
All right, Professor.
When we do that, all the contentions on ground now will be resolved by good and
we do thank you very much
regulator.
Indeed. It is indeed a conversation worth having again, and thank you for talking to us this morning. Professor Tony Radia, Professor of Broadcast Management and Media Law of Ibadan University, Okada, is a formerly head of Department of Mass Communications, Nasarawa State University in Kefi, former DG NTA and former DG NOA. Always a pleasure to have you on, Prof.
Thank you very much.
All right, so there you go. That is the show today. So on behalf of all of us, thank you for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.